Alrighty, here we go here, folks. First examination is over. We are now on lecture number 9. You're over 1/3 of the way completed with this course here. Alright, we're going to begin a new section here. We're going to start today with World War I. It's going to take us 2 lectures to get through this big topic, a lot of visuals I'm going to display with you, and hopefully I can get them facing in the right direction here. But like I said, we're going to be talking about World War I, the war to end all wars, the Great War, some people refer to it as, the war to make the world safe for democracy. Alright, let's go to our camera here, folks, and we'll mention those again. Like I said, World War I, some people refer to it as the Great War, war to end all wars, war to make the world safe for democracy. But unfortunately, it is not going to make the world safe for democracy. We're going to have 20 years of instability. I'll write that for you here, folks. And actually what World War I is, it's no more than just a dress rehearsal. It's no more than just spring training for another war that's going to be 4 times as devastating as World War I. And that is absolutely incredible to believe that. And this war is going to begin on the 6th of August 1914. I'll give you a slightly different date, change a little bit later, but we'll say for all practical purposes, the actual fighting begins on the 6th of August in 1914, and it will end on November of 1918. This was our first time that we're going to ever see total war. This is war which is fought on the land, it's fought on the sea, the high seas, is fought in the air. It is total war, something like we had never seen before. It's going to result in 37 million casualties. That is just beyond my imagination to even think about that here, folks. 37 million casualties, and that is talking about civilian casualties and military casualties. Of the military dead, it would amount to between 8.5 million to 9 million combat deaths. And if we break this down, we'll find that Germany had 2 million for Russia, and Russia will quit the war a year early before the war is actually over here, folks. 1.7 million. France will lose 1.6 million. This is killed now. This is not just casualties here. 1.6 million. Let's look at some of the other nations here, and I'm just listing here for the major nations here. For Austria-Hungary, 1.5 million Austria-Hungary. Great Britain had 900,000 combat deaths, and the war wasn't even fought on British soil. And for the United States, and we got into the war for less than a year here, my friends, and for the United States, we had 116,516 deaths, of which 50,000 were combat deaths. Most of those deaths here in 1917 were caused by Spanish flu. Kind of like what we're experiencing now here, folks, with the COVID-19. But 50,000 combat deaths in the United States was in combat only 8 months. 8 months. So it is a devastating war here. So it was an entire generation of European youth, and I'm not even talking about American youth. An entire generation of European youth. Those individuals born around the year 1895, around that period of time too. So why do we have these casualties so high? Well, there are many reasons for that, and I'm going to share a number of visuals with you. I told you that earlier, and we'll look at this. And this was developed in 1883, 1893. And this individual, 1883, 1884, I mean to say, this individual is known as Hiram Maxim. Well, it tells you at the top here what he developed. And he developed what was called machine gun. This machine gun, which could fire as many as 600 rounds a minute, we will perfect those to where it's even more devastating with that. All right, so anyway, those are the machine guns here. That's going to certainly enhance the casualties here. Let me share a few more photographs here. I'm going to go back to me in just a second here, folks. Try to get these positioned properly here. And let's see what else we have. For the first time, we're going to see this type of device. I'll leave it to your own imagination, but I would ask you in class, what is this? This is armored warfare, folks. We are seeing tanks. Tanks for the first time. And actually, the British that developed the first tanks in 1915, and then they would later be pioneered by some of the other nations, to include Germany and France. All right, let's see what else we have here. And we have heavy artillery. Actually, this is not heavy artillery. This is field artillery. And that's an American gun crew there firing a French artillery piece. And let's see what else we have here. Here's a German machine gun crew. You can see the gunner there. The gunner who, of course, is behind the shield. And you can see the belt feeders feeding the ammunition through that. Notice the type of helmet that the German soldiers have. Sometimes we refer to them as the pickle helmets. Sometimes it's referred to as a Kaiser helmet. I have to tell you folks something on myself here. I'm not real proud of this, but when I was a little boy, my dad gave me one of these Kaiser helmets, and I'm telling you, you couldn't peel it off my head with the jaws of life. I wore that even to sleep in, and I don't know what happened to it. Somehow my mother just mysteriously made it disappear. Okay, so let's move beyond here with the American artillery crew. It was a time in which we had these dreadnoughts, these huge battleships out on the ocean seas here. This is a British ship. This British ship was the HMS Invincible, which is proving that it is not very invincible, as it's being blown literally out of the water. All right, it was a time in which we had something else brand new to warfare, and this was the use of the aeroplane. And all sides would use this. And I've got a lot of comments to make to you about these types of aircraft here, biplanes. That's what you're seeing in the photograph here. If you can imagine biplane, that means like 2 wings, monoplane, 1 wing, triplane, which is 3 wings. But that is certainly going to enhance warfare here. More on that at a later time. So anyway, you kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about here. So let's go back to the camera here, folks, and we'll get our light adjusted right here. And we have 2 principal groups here. And I'm going to go back to the map behind me in just a second, but I want to let you get an opportunity to write this down. We have one group which is called the Triple Entente. Triple Entente. Loosely, we refer to them as the Allied powers. Now, this will be made up of Great Britain, France, and Russia. Great Britain, France, and Russia. This makes up the Triple Entente, or the Allied powers. And then we have the opposing side here, in this group, which was referred to as the Triple Alliance. The Triple Alliance, loosely referred to as the Central Powers. This is Germany, this is Austro-Hungary, and it's also the Ottoman Empire. Now, prior to the war, the Triple Alliance was Germany, Austro-Hungary, and Italy. But by the time we get into the war itself, the Triple Alliance is actually the German and the Austro-Hungarians and the Ottoman Empire. All right, so I need to go back here to my camera and let you look behind me here, folks. And let's try to identify these various areas here. I'll try to use my pencil for this. And for the Triple Alliance, we'll do the Triple Alliance first. The Triple Alliance is in pink. If you want to call this color here pink, it would consist of Germany here. We get Austria-Hungary here. And if we go way down here, and I'll have to move this around for you folks to see this, and we get down into Turkey, which is here with the Ottoman Empire. All right, if we go back over here, folks, let's see where we have the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente is made up of England, which is here, France, which is here. You can see France there. And we have Russia, which is present over there. So you need to be able to distinguish between those 2 groups, the Triple Entente and also the Triple Alliance here. And I want you to recognize that. So back to our slides we go here, folks. And this war, and this goes contrary to what I told you a few minutes ago, the war began, in my estimation here, on the 28th of June in 1914. We will not have any firing, any shooting to take place until the 6th of August. But technically speaking, in my firm belief, this is when the war began. And it's going to happen here in a place, and I'll write it down for you here, folks. It's going to happen in a place which is called Sarajevo. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to keep going back and forth between me and the map behind me and your notes here. But it takes place in the capital city in an area which is called Bosnia. Now, Bosnia is right next to Serbia. These are highly nationalistic individuals there. And I'll have to tell you folks here that in Sarajevo, in this area of Bosnia, this had been an area which had been turned over to Austria-Hungary just a few short years earlier. And we have a lot of nationalists, Serbian nationalists here, that feel like that Sarajevo should be in the hands of Bosnia and not in the hands of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So on this date here, which is the 28th of June, did I write it for you good folks here? And yeah, I guess I had it on the previous slide. 28th of June in 1914 in Sarajevo, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and did I write his name out for you here, folks? And I did. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And when we say Austro-Hungarian Empire, this is Austria and Hungary. And for the Archduke, he is next in line to be the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He is not the Emperor. The Emperor is Franz Joseph, an elderly man. If I remember right, I think he was 84 years of age. Not expected to live much longer. He will live 2 years longer, as a matter of fact. But anyway, next in line is that of Franz Ferdinand. And he is a nephew of the Emperor. And he doesn't have much of appreciation for his nephew, Franz Ferdinand, by the way. But anyway, Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophia, and I did not write her name out for you, Sophia, were scheduled to make a visit. It was actually a military visit down to Sarajevo. And they had been warned, don't make this visit. And by the way, if you go to Sarajevo today, which is a beautiful place to visit, there, you'll find it to be about 50% Christian and about 50% Muslim here. All right, man, it wasn't that way at that time. And nonetheless here, we'll find that the Archbishop, Franz Ferdinand, if you were in class with me, I'll show you maps of the city here, folks, but being in the environment here with the camera, it's just nearly impossible for me to show you a detailed city map of Sarajevo. But this is what the Archbishop looked like. Franz Ferdinand, young guy here, supposedly nice looking. And his wife, Sophia, she was not nobility, but she was not peasant either. And anyway, it was one of those marriages, which is a morganatic marriage, which, and they did have children, by the way, but the children would not be allowed to assume the royalty titles here of Archbishop or Emperor if the case should arrive there. And they were traveling in here. They got off a train and were traveling by motorcade and going over to it was like a courthouse, a theater, where they were going to have breakfast there. And when they were driving down the street, an assassin-to-be threw a bomb. It was actually like a hand grenade, and threw that at their car. There were about 7 cars in the motorcade. And the Archbishop, he either swatted the grenade away, or the driver sped the car, and the grenade hit the back of the trunk of the car and bounced off and went under the car behind and blew up. And it killed a couple of individuals. Well, for the car that the Archbishop was in, they actually went to the breakfast engagement where the Archbishop made a claim. He said, I've come to visit your city and you've tried to kill me. And then very, very crazily, when the breakfast was over, the Sophia and the Archbishop got back in the same car. And by the way, this car does not have a reverse gear. So if you make a bad turn, then the driver has to turn the wheel, get out, and push the car in the right direction here. He has to push it backwards. And sure enough, when they were going back to the town, and they were scheduled to make another stop, but nobody had told the driver to take a different direction. And when they came up to an intersection, they made a right turn. And when they did make that right turn, the car, they realized they were going in the wrong direction. And the driver stopped, had to turn the wheels, get out of the car, and try to push the car in the reverse direction. And that's when an assassin-to-be, a 19-year-old Serbian schoolboy, he was a Serbian schoolboy, and he was a member of what was called the Young Bosnian Society. But he stepped up to the side of the car here with a .380 caliber pistol. It's an FN model 1910, and fired 2 shots point blank range into the car. The car, by the way, the bonnet was back. It was like a convertible so that the people could see the Archbishop, and so there was nothing to obstruct the shots whatsoever. And the first shot that was fired hit Sophia in the abdomen, and it penetrated the descending abdominal aorta, and she died immediately. Of course, the Archbishop himself, he was shot in the neck with a second shot, and he died within just a matter of seconds. So both individuals, their lives were taken here. And let's see here. Let me flip over a few pages here. And if you were in class here, I would have a color photograph. This is the actual uniform that the Archbishop Franz Ferdinand was wearing at that time. They had to cut it off of him, by the way, and you can see where it was cut in this area here. The individual that fired that shot, by the way, 19-year-old, name is Gavrilo Princip. 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. He'd been a failure in everything in life, a tiny little guy, and somehow he felt like that if he shot the Archbishop Franz Ferdinand, this would make him a big shot, making an important person here. Well, he was immediately taken into custody. You can actually go there today, here, folks, and go right by where the Archbishop was shot. There's a museum. If you look at this, this is a museum right here. At that time, it was a breakfast shop. It was a little restaurant. And here you can see, if I can get myself positioned right here. Here's Gavrilo Princip right here. He's being apprehended by the authorities there. He tried to take a cyanide capsule and take his own life, but it just burned his throat. It was not effective. Tried to turn a pistol on himself, and they grabbed it away from him here. You can see the pistol, the FN model 1910 that I was talking about a minute ago, inside that museum, but that is not the pistol that was used by Gavrilo Princip. These are earlier photographs here, which are showing the Archbishop Franz Ferdinand here. Notice the ostrich plume hat that he has on. Looks rather ridiculous to me. Here's Sophia in the background. And here's the car that they were in. Now, here's the Archbishop. Where am I here? Here's the Archbishop. Sophia's where my fingertip is, and then here's the Archbishop there. This is the actual car, and I've not seen that car, but it is in a museum. I believe it's in Austria. I believe that's where it is, too. Okay, so anyway, that's the events that we had here, folks. That's going to precipitate this. And I'd like for you to recognize that with Gavrilo Princip, Archbishop Franz Ferdinand, so forth here. Okay, so Gavrilo Princip wrote the name down for you here. He's a member of the Young Bosnian Society. And amazingly, what's going to happen here is that Austria-Hungary will wait 25 days before they do anything. And at the end of the 25th day, on the 23rd of July in 1914, they issued an ultimatum to Serbia. These are called 11 demands, and they gave Serbia 48 hours to respond to this. And actually, Serbia was not looking for war. So they were in agreement with 10 of those demands. But one of the demands, which would cause a weakening of the sovereignty of Serbia, they wouldn't go along with. And Austria-Hungary then used that as an excuse to declare war on Serbia. Now watch what happens here, folks. These things take place in a very, very rapid sequence. And when I mean rapid sequence, about every 2 or 3 days, something's going to happen. So let's watch what happens. So after the ultimatum was refused, then Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia was duty-bound, pledged by treaty to come to the assistance of Serbia. So when they did that, then Russia here declared war on Austria-Hungary and declared war on Germany. So Germany in turn declares war on France. I'm trying to get my lines right here. Declares war on France. Great Britain was allied by treaty to go along with France. So Great Britain now declares war on Germany. All right, you try to track that down here. I'm working backwards here, folks. In the meantime, Bulgaria jumps in on the side of Austria-Hungary and Germany. The Ottoman Empire does the same thing here. Montenegro does the same thing over on this side here. Montenegro is on this side over here. And anyway, so in a matter of just a few days, we now have ourselves a world war to take place. So what's the position of the United States? For the United States, we are going to take a position of neutrality. And for President Wilson, the President of the United States, he called upon all Americans to be impartial in thought as well as deed. In other words, we're going to stay out of it. We're going to be a neutral nation. But I have to tell you, good folks, in all practicality here, the United States was serving to be the principal weapons supplier to France and Great Britain. So we're not neutral at all. But a wave of anti-Germanism spread across the country here, folks, across America. On the other hand, we're going to find that many Americans, German Americans, and Irish Americans felt like that we were siding with the wrong group, that we should actually be siding with Germany here. But a wave of Germanism spread across America. For American propagandists, German propagandists, they were using all sorts of devices here. You always see the the Hun, if you will, appearing as if he is a beast, always trying to ravish a young woman. And if you look at this propaganda poster here, you can see the German Hun with a pickle helmet, the Kaiser Bill helmet, has this woman always in the house, always in his arms here in harm's way. What will you give for her? And we'll share another one here. Here's a depiction here, always showing the German as being a bad guy, as a beast, such as destroy this mad brute here. Enlist in the army here. Here we have another one here, halt the Hun. Halt the Hun. And you can see the American doughboy. This will be later in the war here when America does join the war. The German has this young lady in his grasp there, preparing to ravage her, and the young American doughboy there is pushing the German away. Buy U.S. government bonds. All right. And anyway, like I said, this wave of anti-Germanism will sweep across America here. All right, folks, I want to ask you good folks, how many of you folks like hamburgers? Everybody like hamburgers? Well, you know that's named for Hamburg, Germany, so we're going to change the name. It is no longer a hamburger. It is going to be a Liberty sandwich. How many of you good folks like a good Frankfurter? A Frankfurter. Well, that's not good because that's named after Frankfurt, Germany. So we're going to name it Liberty sausage. Any of you folks like a sauerkraut? Sauerkraut? Nope. Liberty cabbage. That's the new name for it here, folks. Any of you folks have German Shepherds? Nope, nope, nope. It is an Alsatian Shepherd. That is the new name for it here. So we see a lot of name changes here, folks. East Berlin, Iowa becomes Lincoln, Iowa. We'll find that Kaiser Street becomes Main Street here. East Germantown, Indiana will become Pershing, Indiana. All of this in an effort just to de-Germanize everything in our country. All right, so back we go here, folks. Anti-Germanism. And British propaganda, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Now, for the Germans, on the high seas, the Germans just cannot match up to the Royal Navy on the high seas. So the Germans developed a different type of device here, folks. And this will be the big equalizer on the high seas. And I will try to get you to translate this. And what they refer to these devices as, they call them Unterseeboats. Unterseeboats. Now, if you translate the word here, German's a little bit challenging here, folks, but basic German is not. Under the sea boat, under the sea boat, are commonly abbreviated. This is a U-boat. If you can't figure out what I'm talking about here, folks, this is a submarine. Run silent, run deep, and they're very, very effective. And moving through the ocean, under the ocean surface here, not very fast whatsoever, but you can slip up on Allied ships here, and you can torpedo those ships. All right, and that's exactly what would happen. And the Germans were very, very effective with this. So let me take you to an event right here, folks, and it's going to take place on the 7th of May in 1915, and it involves an unarmed British passenger liner, or we think it's unarmed anyway, and this ship is known as the Lusitania, and it was sailing off the Irish coastline. I'll tell you what, let me go back to my camera here, and let me try to show you where it was here. And where it was, I cannot show you very well here, but it was en route. It was en route to Liverpool. Now, Ireland is right over in this area right here that's off the map. But it was just a matter of a half a day before the Lusitania would dock in Liverpool. And they were right on the, shall we say, in the Irish Sea here, just in the southern parts, the eastern parts of Ireland. They were 11 miles off coast when they encountered a German U-boat. They didn't even know the U-boat was present there. And Unterseeboot Schwarzsee, U-boat 20, fired 2 torpedoes, or maybe it was just 1 torpedo. Authorities differ on this. The first torpedo hit the Lusitania and the bow, and the second torpedo hit the Lusitania in the engine room. Or maybe it was just 1 torpedo and it hit it in the engine room. We don't really know. And for the Lusitania drifted 2 miles towards Ireland itself, and it finally went down. So I'll go back to my camera here to show you the numbers here, folks. Numbers differ depending upon the historian, but 1,198 died. 128 Americans, or maybe it was 123, or maybe it was 132 Americans. Historians differ on that. But these individuals went down with the boat. If you look at my, I'm going to share a couple more photographs with you folks here. We'll go back to me for a second. Here's the headlines of the newspaper, the New York Tribune. 1,300 died. You can see the numbers different from what I gave you as the Lusitania goes to the bottom here. 400 Americans on board, torpedoed ship. Americans, Washington stirred just as much as when USS Maine sunk. And you can see a likeness there of the Lusitania. Let's see if I have some. Now, the name of the city here, by the way, I'm going to go back to this camera. The name of the city at that time was called, in the Republic of Ireland, was called Queenstown. Queenstown. Since that time, the name has been changed, and I just wrote this in a little bit ago. It's called Cove. It's spelled C-O-B-H, but it is pronounced like C-O-V-E, Cove. Cove. It's a quaint little fishing community there. Nice place to be. I was there a couple of summers ago. Like it very much. You can take the train, nearby train, and go right over to across the bay and go over to Cork. Some of you are probably familiar with Cork. If you look at my photograph here, this is on the streets here of Cove itself, a memorial to those individuals that lost their lives on the Lusitania. If you go over to this side over here, get my finger down a little bit, you can actually go into a little pub there, which is, if I remember right, I think it's called the Rob Roy, and that's where many of the deceased, those that drowned off the Lusitania, where they were taken. And you actually go in there and get yourself a pint of Guinness, or a couple of pints of Guinness, I often do anyway, and sit there and just kind of reflect on all those bodies, you know, that were placed there at that time. So anyway, now I want to tell you about another ship of this period, and this is a ship. Let me share another likeness with you here, and I'm going to go back to myself for just a second here, folks. And this ship, it's not a sister ship to the Lusitania, but if you read the date there, and I can't read it, actually it's sometime in 1912 anyway, 1,500 lives lost when the Titanic plunges headlong into the depths of the sea. So all of this area I'm talking about here in Ireland here, you know, all of that area from Belfast down to Cove, Queenstown, if you will, is so closely associated with the Lusitania and the Titanic. And it's like the cities, both places there, that's just what their theme is. Here's the Titanic, 1912. I know this is not our subject here in World War I, but I thought I would spend a few minutes here telling you a little bit about the Titanic. Here's another likeness here of the Titanic. Now, it is not a Cunard-class ship. It is a member of the cruise line, which is called White Star. These ships are not quite as fast as that of the Cunard-class ships, like the Mauretania and the Lusitania. There is another advertisement here for the White Star Line from Southampton, Cherbourg, into New York. All of these came from Cove, by the way. This is the actual harbor here. This is the, what am I trying to say, the port area where the Titanic made its last call. This is where it took its final passengers on board, and of course set sail for the United States and hit the iceberg, as you well know. But it's now a museum which was dedicated primarily to the Titanic. But you can visit there today if you do so. This is the actual pier, the remains of the pier in which those passengers that boarded the Titanic on the final voyage of the Titanic, where they actually got on here. If you go a little bit to the north, up to Northern Ireland in Belfast, this is in Belfast. It's a monument there that's dedicated to those individuals that lost their lives when the Titanic went down. The Titanic was constructed in Belfast, and it made its final voyage out of Belfast before it stopped in Queenstown to pick up its last passengers. Okay, I hope I didn't bore you too much here, folks. That's just all interesting material there about that period of time. Okay, so let's see where we need to go now. Oh, and by the way, for many individuals, President Wilson included, President Wilson from the United States, declared this as an act of piracy, and they threatened the German Kaiser Wilhelm II that if you continue to do things like this, the United States are going to get involved in this war. So on the appearances, it has like the Titanic, or excuse me, the Lusitania was an innocent passenger ship, when in actuality it was transporting 4,200 cases of ammunition, munitions, small arms, so it really was smuggling contraband into England itself. Okay, a year later, French ship, which was known as the Sussex, was torpedoed. Once again, American lives were lost, and once again, President Wilson threatens the Kaiser, if you continue to do this, there will be a problem, and the United States is going to enter into the war. Well, for Americans, many Americans were in favor of the war. Many Americans were against the war. Some of the prominent Americans that were opposed to the war, Eugene V. Debs. In fact, I'll tell you this later. Eugene V. Debs was made an anti-war speech, and he was placed in prison with a prison sentence for 10 years for making an anti-war speech. William Jennings Bryan was against the war. Robert La Follette, I don't know if you remember him, Fighting Bob La Follette, was opposed to the war. We had an organization called the American Women's Peace Party against the war. NAWSA, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, was against the war, but when the United States actually gets involved in the war, then they change sides, and they are in favor of the war now. So anyway, so during the war, we're also going to see a presidential election to take place. And this is the presidential election of 1916. So let's move into that presidential election. And I want you to go back and refresh your memory that when Woodrow Wilson won the presidential election in 1912, he barely won the presidential election. The only reason he won it, in my estimation, the Republican vote was split. It was split between Taft and the Progressive Party, Theodore Roosevelt. All right, so here are candidates here, and Woodrow Wilson is going to run against Charles Evans Hughes, the Socialist Party candidate. Ran A.L. Benson. Eugene V. Debs set this one out. He was actually running for a legislative position here from Indiana, and so he did not run for the president here. And for Woodrow Wilson, his campaign slogan was, what did we do? What did we do? We didn't go to war. We didn't go to war. He kept us out of the war. That was his campaign slogan. Charles Evans Hughes, dull, stilted individual here, a long history of politics, by the way. America first, America efficient. I'm not real thrilled with that. So nonetheless here, folks, let's take a look at our election results. And in the popular vote, it was 49.4% for Woodrow Wilson, and for Charles Evans Hughes, 46.2%, 3% for A.L. Benson. Electoral College, which is what counts, 277 electoral votes for Woodrow Wilson, 254 for Charles Evans Hughes. It was the closest victory by an incumbent in the history of the United States. So is Woodrow Wilson popular? I don't know about that. It's just lukewarm here, folks. All right, let's move on. And for Woodrow Wilson, he promised Americans several things here. A new world order. Peace without victory. You're going to have to think about that for a second. What do we mean, peace without victory? Let's just stop the fighting and everybody just go home. There's no victor, clear victor. And he also wanted, this is Woodrow Wilson, to establish a peacekeeping organization where never, ever again would the world see war. And this would be known as the League of Nations. And it will be the dying dream of Woodrow Wilson's to create this League of Nations. All right, so anyway, let's move on here, folks. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the war. In fact, let me show you some photographs with this. And good time for us to do this. And let me go back to me and the camera here, folks. And we'll share some photographs here, and I've got an array of this. Let's try to get my lighting right here. And these are German troops. You can see the pickle helmet there. Notice the hobnail boots of these German troops. This was obviously taken, this photograph was taken on the Eastern Front, not on the Western Front. The Western Front is where France is. The Eastern Front would be where Russia is. And on the Western Front, it was primarily trench warfare, and on the Eastern Front, it was usually fought not in the trenches, but out in the open, such as that. All right, here's some French troops here. French troops, obviously a staged photograph because they have their head above the parapet line. And I'm telling you, folks, if you get your head above the trench line right there, you'll be a dead man. There will be a sniper from the German side that will put a bullet right through your helmet. Okay, so let's move on to some others. Trench warfare, characteristic of war on the Western Front here. And I'm telling you, folks, this is your Holiday Inn room. If you look at this, and I'm working upside down, so you have to use your imagination. Notice all the sleeping soldiers. They're sleeping there either on a little wall that's been dug out of the side of the trench. That, by the way, may serve to be your grave. If you take a artillery shell into the trench there, you know, you have a ready-made grave. You can see soldiers are sleeping down in the mud, you know, which is going to be either mud. If it's not mud, it's going to be probably 6 inches thick and dust. One soldier up at the top there that's serving as the sentry. Like I said earlier, do not get your head above that parapet line or your life will be taken. Some of you may have had the opportunity to read the book All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Romerick. And which is a wonderful book, by the way. And anyway, exciting end to that story there where a soldier does get his head above the trench line and a bullet will take his life right through the eyes here. Okay, let me show you another photograph here. This is a photograph also of this is a recreation of an actual trench. Oh, and by the way, for some of you that watched the movie 1917, wonderful movie, I'll put a plug in for that movie. And anyway, it's an excellent movie. It shows you the way trench warfare was at that time. All right, and let's see what else we have here in the way of these photographs. You know an attack is impending here. Your officers will tell you to clean your weapons, get your weapons loaded. And then this is called, in the cult of the offensive, it is called going over the top. And we see these GIs here. I think these are Americans. They may be British. We wore the same style helmets with that. Going down the trench line here, the barbed wire will be parted, and these soldiers are going to go over the top here. And they will assault the enemy position probably 400 yards into the front. Going across no man's land, this is what you're seeing here. All cover and concealment. Other than that, a shell craters has been removed here. Many, many artillery rounds have just rendered that just moonscape, literally, such as that. These are actual American soldiers, and the Meuse Ardennes offensive, which took place in September through November of 1918. America's not at war at this minute here, folks, but this is a photograph showing you American soldiers as after they would become engaged in war. Tanks, tank warfare with some British soldiers here. Wonder what happened here. Well, you can see some of the vulnerabilities of the tank. Number one, they're quite slow. They're not heavily armed here, but they are protected from small arms fire. But you hit a trench, and well, you have to bring in a wrecker, pull it out. Okay, and that can take place. Okay, so let's move on with some of these others here. Showing you taking of a casualty. Now, if you look at this, I want you to think about the morbidity of this. If you shoot an enemy and you kill that soldier, then they've lost one soldier. But if you wound a soldier, then look at this photograph. How many soldiers do you take out of action? Well, you'll do the counting right here, folks. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and one that's in the litter there. So you take 8 soldiers out of action just by wounding a person. So is it better to kill someone or is it better to wound someone? You draw your own conclusions on that. And often what we'll see here, we have hastily dug graves here. And down in the trench itself, I can't get this position right. I'm about to drop all my photographs here. And anyway, we have quick burials to take place. And after a couple of weeks and rain here, you get these macabre appearances there of partially revealed soldiers. All right, I've got my photographs all messed up here, folks. We also made use of zeppelins, dirigibles, which could fly over these convoys, and you could actually spot those your German U-boats, those undersea boats that were down below. Bring in depth charges. These depth charges could be dropped by American destroyers that were much faster than the German U-boats and sink the U-boats. All right, let's see if that's the last one I wish to share with you there, folks, and it is not. We made use of aircraft, such as what you're seeing here. And at first, these aircraft were used just for reconnaissance. Fly over the enemy lines, see where they are, return to your aerodrome, your airfield, and you would give the information, well, they're over behind that hill or 7 miles away. And then some of these pilots, at first they would just wave at each other. They'd fly by each other, wave at each other. And then later somebody thought, well, I think I'll take my service pistol and shoot at the other pilot. And then one thing led to the other, and then we had rifle shots, shotgun shots. Then the observer would think about, well, I'll take a shotgun, or maybe I'll take a machine gun, and they would mount the machine gun on the aircraft. And anyway, at first they put the machine gun on the fuselage, the front fuselage, and they ended up shooting off the propeller. That's not too good. You shoot the propeller off of your aircraft, and you become a rock, and you know what happens to a rock when it's up in the sky. It comes straight down. And then they developed a device in which you would take a band and put it around a propeller so it would deflect, if you will, the bullets. Well, that didn't work very well because the pilot could be hit by a ricochet. And then they came up with the idea, let's take the machine gun and put it on the top wing. Well, that's not too good. That means the pilot has to stand up, and that's not conducive to flying an aircraft, you know, when you're standing up in the cockpit. And then they came up with the idea, let's take the machine guns, like these twin Lewis guns, and we'll place them on the back of the aircraft and let the observer, you know, shoot at the enemy. The only problem with that, you got to be in front of the enemy aircraft to be able to shoot it. And then leave it up to the Germans. The Germans developed what was called the interrupter gear. And on the interrupter gear, this meant as the propeller would turn, the machine gun would fire between the wash, if you will, of the propeller, so that you didn't shoot the propeller blades off with that too. It was called the interrupter gear, and that changed warfare entirely here, folks. All right, so here we can see some more of the photographs. In this photograph here, as on the opposite side here, this is the British King here. One more over. The British King, I can't reach it right here's where I'm touching here, who was George V, by the way. Okay, let's move right along. More photographs here showing you aerial combat, and I'm going to move away from that, and I will share a couple of books with you good folks here. And for America, our greatest ace here, I'm going to go back here, folks, to this. Our greatest ace in World War I was this individual, Eddie Rickenbacker. And if my memory holds right, I think he shot down, I think it was 36 enemy aircraft. Eddie Rickenbacker had been a race car driver in the Indianapolis 500, by the way. Of course, my favorite, and my favorite of all time, if you came into my office right now, you'd see two photographs of this individual here. Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. Red Baron. You can see a Fokker D7 triplane in the background right there. He's wearing the blue Max, by the way, around his collar. And if you entered into my bedroom when I was a little kid, you would find these biplanes hanging from a kite string or from a fishing line all over my room, because every one of these little kits that I could buy, you know, I would construct one of these World War II aircraft. And this book actually came from my childhood, so it's an old book, by the way, but everything I could put my hands on and reading about World War I aviators, you know, I did do so with that. All right, so the flying aces from that period of time. Okay, so on we go here, folks. Some of the major engagements that would take place was a battle that took place at Verdun. That's where it's pronounced, just like Verdun. On the first day of this battle, took place in 1916, and the summer of 1916, we had over 3 million artillery rounds that were fired during that very first day. All in all, I forget what it was. Let's see here. I think it was like 100 million rounds, if you will, here of artillery rounds that were fired during the Verdun expedition here. And I was trying to get an exact figure on it, and I just don't see that exact figure with that. Okay, to relieve the pressure on Verdun, the Battle of the Somme took place here. This was in July, and the months that would follow that in 1916. Day one. In the Battle of the Somme, Great Britain had 60,000 casualties on the very first day. 60,000 casualties here. All in all, we're going to end up in the Battle of the Somme with 500,000 German casualties, 200,000 French casualties, 400,000 British casualties, for a total, if you will, here, folks, of 1,100,000 casualties in the Battle of the Somme. Another interesting thing that's going to take place here in 1917, early parts of 1917, is a message, a telegram, was intercepted by the British. And it was coded. It was coded, but the British deciphered it. This telegram had been written by Arthur Zimmermann, who was a German foreign minister. He wrote this, by the way. He was in Germany when he wrote this, but it was intercepted. And under the Zimmermann telegram, it was an offer, and this offer was made to the government of Mexico. And I know you're going to laugh at this and think, well, this is rather stupid with this, but hang on before you do that here, folks. And under the Zimmermann telegram, it was an offer that if Mexico would declare war on the United States and join with Germany, when Germany and Mexico defeated the United States, then all of the southwest of the United States would be returned to Mexico. And you have to ask yourself, well, where did we get the Southwest? Where did we get California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas from? And we got it from Mexico. So it's not going to happen. Mexico is not going to declare war on the United States. But remember the tensions that are existing between the United States and Mexico. But it's just one more thing that's going to inflame the tensions between the United States and Mexico. All right, and Germany, too, for that matter. Okay, so during the war, let me see here, I missed a slide here. So anyway, in following months, in February and March, German U-boats will sink American ships. So Woodrow Wilson called into session joint houses of Congress, and on the 6th of April in 1917, the United States issued a declaration of war against Germany. And we're on the way to war here, folks. Okay, so on we go here, folks. And Woodrow Wilson called it a war without stint or limit. All right, no holds barred. It helped matters, and in 1918, Russia quit the war. I'll also tell you in 1917 that the Russian Tsar was deposed. On the other hand, we're going to find that a communist Russia government will come into existence here. All right, for the United States, we were woefully unprepared to go to war. We had a standing army of 120,000 and 80,000 National Guardsmen, and so we initiated here in 1917 the Selective Service Act, and that means that's what strikes fear into the hearts of the bravest of young men, and I say that loosely here, not in the bravest. But anyway, we're going to eventually draft 3 million men into the services of the United States. We'll have another 2 million men to enlist. That gives us an army of 5 million individuals here, folks. Alrighty, these were organized as the American Expeditionary Force, commonly referred to as the AEF, the American Expeditionary Force. And it will be under the command, if you will, here of John J. Pershing. They refer to him as Blackjack. I'll leave that to your own devices to figure out how he got his name, and I'm not going to tell you, good folks, but Blackjack Pershing is what they refer to him as. A spit and polish individual, one of my favorite generals, by the way. This is what he looked like here. The Pershing missile system is named after him here, but a magnificent leader and a true soldier, if you will, here, John J. Pershing. And it's going to take us a while to assemble this force and get them trained here. In addition to this, we're going to bring into the services here 400,000 African Americans. I think your textbook says it's 300,000 African Americans to serve in the Army and the Navy, not in the Marine Corps. Marine Corps did not allow blacks into the service there. Serving generally in non-combat roles. I'm talking about cooks, drivers, guards, and units that are commanded by white officers. We still have a ways to go here, folks. We had one exception. We had 50,000 African American soldiers that were sent to France, and they fought not under the American Army, but they fought under the French Army. They were referred to as the Harlem Hellfighters. Here we can see a 1919 photograph. Harlem Hellfighters, also known as the 369th here. Interesting reading if you wish to read further about that, the Harlem Hellfighters. Okay, we also had about 10,000 women to serve in service branches here, mostly again as drivers or as clerks, nurses, and really drivers. You had the Women's Motor Corps, a part of that too. But anyway, okay, so let's move on here, folks. There's the Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th here. Let's see who else. Let me try to tie things up. I've already mentioned to you about Eddie Rickenbacker, but One in the United States, one of our most decorated heroes of this war was a Sergeant Alvin York. I'll show you what he looks like here. This is Alvin York from Pell Mell, Tennessee, by the way. You can go to that state park if you wish to do so today. Up there just last summer, as a matter of fact, I believe it was. But Alvin York, it says here, home of America's most decorated World War I soldier. That is not true. It's one of the most decorated. Here's another likeness here. Sergeant York. Interesting place, Pell Mell, Tennessee. Go up to I'm trying to think, Chattanooga, and then go straight north from Chattanooga. And you can go through there. I meant to say Nashville here. And let's move on here. If you visit there today, you'll see the home, the Alvin York family. All right. And if you walk through the woods there, a short piece here, and you'll come up to the burial site there for the York family, which is present there at Pell Mell, Tennessee. All right, let me see what else I need to mention to you folks. I think I'm probably at a good stopping point. I'm looking around myself to make sure I've got all of these visuals covered, and I believe I did here, folks. A lot of visuals for you good folks today, and we've made our way through about half of World War I. When we come back here, folks, we'll talk about some of the engagement that the American soldiers participated in. In fact, I think I'll just go through that now, get that off my plate, so I don't have to address this again. And American forces fought in the Battle of Reims, the Second Battle of the Marne, Chateau Thierry, Belleau Wood, the Meuse-Argonne offensive here, folks, and that took place 26 September through the 11th of November in 1918. Over 1 million Americans were engaged in that offensive here, where we ended up surrounding the Germans and cutting their supply lines. And finally, the Germans asked for peace, and in the Compagnie Forest here, a delegation will get together at 5 o'clock in the morning, and this will be on November the 11th here in 1918. And this delegation of Germans and Allied French and Americans and British will all come to agreement that this war will end 6 hours later. So if we add 6 hours to the 5 o'clock in the morning, this gives us the 11th hour and the 11th day and the 11th month in 1918. And that war finally comes to a close here, folks. So when we return for our next lecture, which will be lecture number 10, we're going to talk about the League of Nations here, folks, and the Paris Peace Conference and those activities that took place after the fighting ended anyway. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.